Sunday, Sunday, Sunday school. Sunday, 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 Sunday. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday.
Hi, and welcome to That Sunday School Girl channel, where I will be your reviewer for the week for the International Sunday School lessons. I am Reverend Charles Nelson, and I truly want to continue to thank God for Evangelist Waynell Henson and all that she does, and all that workers and helpers along the way that help create the atmosphere in the platform to allow us to be able to operate in this capacity and to be able to come to this channel and be a part of the largest cyber community of Sunday school students. Here this week we're going right into a new school year, a new Sunday school year, and dealing with God's law is love. That is, God's law is love. That is the fall for the 2023 to 24 school year. That is the fall quarter. And in this month here in Unit 1, we're going to be looking at the love completes. Love completes where the law falls short. Love completes and the law fall short. Just a quick glance at this week and what this month and what we're going to be looking at Jesus and his dealings with the Pharisees and with the law. We're also going to be looking at some other things in regards to these things in some of the latter lessons. Here today we are starting off this quarter with this lesson coming out of the Gospel according to Luke in the 11th chapter, verses 37 through 44. As we look at these verses, we see first of all some very great things that has taken place here. This is surely a lesson where you need to go back and review and look and read throughout the whole chapter to truly gather the full grasp of all that it is offered here in this reading. And so we're going to be reading today. I will read it from the King James Version. We'll be reading Luke chapter 11, but from my lesson, my study plan is actually going to come out of the English Standard Version, also known as the ESV. But we will be reading those verses through through the King James Version, and we will read it, and it goes likewise at verse 37 in chapter 11 of the Gospel of Luke. As he spake, a certain Pharisee besought him to dine with him, and he went in and sat down to meat. And when the Pharisee saw it, he marveled that he had not first washed before dinner. And the Lord said unto him, Now do ye Pharisees make clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but your inward parts is full of raving and wickedness. Ye fools, did not he that made that which is without? Let me read that next verse. Ye fools, did not he that made that which is without make that which is within also? But rather give alms of such things as ye have, and behold, all things are clean unto you. But woe unto you, Pharisees, for you tithe the mint and rue and all manners of herbs, and pass over judgment and the love of God. These ought you have done, and not to leave the other undone. Woe unto you, Pharisees, for you love the uppermost seats in the synagogue, and greetings in the markets. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for ye are as graves which appear not, that the men walk over them and are not aware of them. That concludes our reading from verses 37 through 44 of the Luke chapter 11 from the King James Version. In one of the commentary lessons, this is titled Jesus Confronts Hypocrisy. Hypocrisy, that is a phrase. It is a phrase some of the older Folks may remember hearing a phrase from down south. They were May-liking. They were pretending. They were putting on a facade. It would be like putting on a mask over your face. You would look one way, but in reality, it's a whole nother way. One of the things it reminded me of when I was just meditating and thinking about all these different things, one of my favorite movies to watch is, don't judge me now, but is A Low Down Dirty Shame. In that movie, one of the characters saw a famous soap opera person, a person that played a character on the soap opera, and was upset because that individual in the soap opera had did one of her favorite people wrong in the soap opera, and she went up and she gave him a punch, all because of the character that he was playing. When I think about hypocrisy and hypocrites, it is someone that plays a role when in reality that is not them. She sucker punched the man that played a role in that soap opera, and so that just made me think about some of those things when thinking about this. So let us go ahead and let's look at this from the text. In verse 37, it starts off, while Jesus was speaking. Jesus was having one of his sessions where he was teaching on some very vital and important things. And one of the last things that he was just teaching on in some of the previous verses is on light. And the text says, while Jesus was speaking, or it could be even better translated, as he had finished speaking on these things, there was a Pharisee that asked him to come and dine with him. And this was something that would be common for the leaders and for the teachers to be able to bring someone in, especially that have taught with so much wisdom and taught with so much authority. And Jesus, he comes right on in. He goes in, he reclines at the table. But there was something that took place that just left the Pharisees astonished. It left him at awe. It left him with a sense of, he could not believe what he was seeing. The Pharisees, it says that the Pharisee was astonished to see that he did not first wash his hands before dinner. Oh my goodness, this was just like the grand thing that just made the whole world crumble. And before we come too hard on the Pharisee, we must take a look at ourselves, because there are some things that take place in our church service, and sometimes when folks may not come, when they come in, they may not dress a certain way, they don't look another way, they don't talk this way, or even from those different aspects of, think about when we get close to our holidays, whenever the fall come around, I'll start thinking we got, school years getting started. Before you know it, we'll be doing things like we'll be shopping for Christmas, and we see things and it goes up and it says Happy Holidays, or they may say Merry Xmas, or they'll say the seasons, and instead of using the word Christ or Merry Christmas and really putting the emphasis on Christ, and we will get all shaken up. We'll be astonished to hear that some of these things that is taking place, and so we could kind of parallel some of those things, and we have to be careful while teaching this lesson, because it is going to rub against some of those things. But we must realize the true intent and the integrity of the text and what Luke is trying to convey out here in this. Well, like I said, one of the things that Jesus was talking about before was light, and the impact that light has, and the influence that light has, and what it can do if you're in good light, and when you're allowing some bad things to come into your eyesight and things of that nature. And so when he looks at this, the Pharisee, he sees this Pharisee and is astonished. Without the Pharisees, without a word being recorded from him, Jesus speaks up. He says, now you Pharisees, you cleanse the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. When I started looking at these things, it let me know that when that there is an expectation for leaders, there's an expectation for those that is charged with great responsibilities within the kingdom of God, and he's handling this responsibility. He's speaking to the Pharisee, not to say that your laypersons are not held to a standard. But we see here in this text that Jesus is addressing these things with the Pharisees. But even just because he is addressing with the Pharisee, don't mean that we should not look at this and take some inventory ourselves. And if we are true with ourselves, some of these things may be some ouch moments for us. One of the things here that I notice in the text is the elevating of traditions. The Pharisees was more concerned about what looked right on the outside and not so much concerned on the things on the inside. Why do I say that? Because in the text it says that the Pharisees cleansed the outside of the cup and of the dish. But inside is full of, inside you in particular, he's saying it, and inside of you is full of greed and wickedness. You do a whole lot of, and if I could put or use another example of these things, it says basically you do a whole lot to make sure that the things on the outside look really, really good, but everything on the inside has not even been dealt with. This interaction is not saying that Jesus did not care about the outward appearance, this washing of hands, but it should not be done to a degree that the outside becomes so tangible that it becomes that you don't even pay any attention to what's going on the inside. When the traditions of man is elevated beyond the teachings of the Word of God. If I would be able to say this is vital, while we must do as is written in the Word of God, study to show ourselves approved unto God, a workman who need not be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth. Notice here that there is a sharp contrast of things that's taking place on the outside, the outer man, versus the things that are taking place on the inner man. He goes on to say, he says, you fools, or some translation says, you foolish persons or people, or he uses this word fools. You're responding without proper insight. You are acting stupid. You are acting in this manner. He said, did not God in this, I like how the English Standard Version captures that phrase in verse 40. He says, did not he who made the outside make the inside also? But give as alms those things that are within, and behold, everything is clean for you. And so he's writing, and he's want to shift their attention from just primarily dealing with things on the outside, but also including things that take place on the inside. Why? Because God, the same God that made everything on the outside, is the same God that made things on the inside. No wonder David would be praying and he would say, create inside of me a clean heart and renew a right spirit in me. We know that David is one that was known to be a man after God's own heart. We know that we are to present our bodies as a living sacrifice unto God. And so let us move on away. Not only did we see an elevated tradition, but then Jesus also he addresses an elevated this elevated insignificance that they did. They put so much elevated insignificance on things. Well, let me take that back. I don't know how I said that. They elevated things that was insignificant. Why do I say that? Because notice he closes off this part and he's talking about those things, those alms that are to be given, and then he turns around and he says, but woe to you, Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and every herb. And, so these things, it would be a very minute task to sit down and to tithe herbs. It would be literally taking all these little seeds, these little herbs, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll count these things out and make this tithe. It would be, you put all this attention to the minute things, but you won't give not any attention to justice or the love of God. He says that in verse 42, he says, you tithe these things and you neglect justice and the love of God. This is something that we ought to be looking at and ought to be mindful, because sometimes, we come from some generations, and maybe even some now, that you may see in your churches where a certain bench or a pew has been dedicated to a family because of their financial contributions, or some things, the record keeping of who's tithing and who's not, and how much people are giving and whatnot. And we must realize that these things are important. These things are valuable, but we ought not do it to a degree where we become so self-centered that we are looking at things that are insignificant, but yet neglecting things like justice and the love of God. Notice that the God we serve is a just God. He is a righteous God. He is a God of mercy. And it was because of that and when the children of Israel was in the Egyptian bondage, when it was under the Babylonian bondage, when it was in these instances, that it was God that came and freed and rescued them. And now the Jews, they are looking for a Messiah, a Redeemer, to come and rescue them from under the hands of the oppression and the things that was going place under the Roman government. But in the same grace, that same mercy, that same justice that they were experiencing and had experienced and was looking forward to experience from God, is the same thing that he was calling unto them, especially these leaders, to be a role model or an example of. And we must be so careful that we are not neglecting justice, that we are not so centered on our own lives and doing things that glorifies us and that are beneficial to our own self, and be void of compassion for others. I know in society it is so easy when we can hear songs about living life in an independent way, when there are so many books on shelves about self-care, self-preservation, self-help, and self-aids, and all these different things. If we put a lot of energy into self, and we fail at times to have that same compassion for others. And then not only that, but we also must realize that for the love of God, as this whole quarter we're going to be looking at, that God's love is God's law is love. Let us continue to move on swiftly through these here. He goes on through that here. He says, these, in verse 42, he says, these you ought to have done without neglecting the other. So here he is again. He said, now I'm not telling you that tithing and your offerings is not important, or that these, but it ought to be done, and these two ought to be done as well. And so when we're looking at these you ought to have done without neglecting the others. This is not where you can play, do this but avoid doing that. How can we say we truly love God, who we have not seen, but yet neglect, don't love, don't service, don't give mercy to our brother and sister who we see each and every day? He comes into verse 43 with yet another woe. He says, woe to you Pharisees, for you love the best seat in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplace. And in this place here, it is interesting because it seems as if Jesus is building. He talks about the first woe, the first thing from based off of the Pharisee response to him not washing. And he ends it off there, and he talks about giving alms. And then he picks up in verse 42 talking about woe about the way that they tithe. And in there he talks about this love of God. And then he picks up in verse 44 3 about this another woe, and it tells what it is that they do love. They love the best seat. So we see some elevated traditions, we see elevated things that are insignificant, but we see an elevated sense of importance. They love these high seats, these things that put them on these pedestals and give them great and powerful names and positions. But yet, it's something else that has been neglected. It said you desire these best seats in the marketplace, and in the and all these magnificent greetings, and the best seats in the synagogues, and these greeting places in the greetings in the marketplace. What was interesting to me was the synagogue was originally this place to meet God. But they have become a place where they will be seen and they will be valued. And this is very vital and important when we're dealing with leaders and leadership, especially the things that we see now, that we are not self-promoters, but that we are promoting God. Essentially going right back into the whole thing with light and the things that was being portrayed into. We could look as this as he comes to this end here, talking about how they were how they, even in this sense that they were like graves without markers. I'm gonna put it like that. They were like graves without markers. They did not have the things that they needed to identify those graves. And this becomes vital and important because these graves, if I could just, it was like having a cave that was on the side of the road. These things needed to be marked so that people would know not to enter them and not become ceremonially unclean. And that it really wowed me, and it was appealing to me that Jesus was talking about being a light. In verse 33 of the same chapter, he says, "No one after lighting a lamp puts it in a cellar or under a basket, but on a stand, so that those who enter may see the light." The religious leaders of those days, and even now in our days, they have a responsibility to be a light into a dying world, to be a lamp unto the things. We know the word of God is said to be a lamp unto our feet and a light on our pathway. We know these things are to be true, but when we look at how, some of these things on ourselves, when we look at some of our leaders, we got to ask ourselves, are we a light that is revealing a pathway to us, or are we a lamp or a light that is showing a light or a pathway to God? Are we pointing our lamp or light to be a source that leads people to Jesus? Notice what is taking place here in this text. He says you are supposed to be this quality of light, but really what you are like this cave. And you have people aimlessly walking in thinking they have safety and comfort, but they are coming in and becoming unclean. They're becoming unable to be ceremonially presented. In essence, let me put it like this. People are looking towards us, not even just as leaders, but as Christians, period. And they are looking for some insight or something different than what this world has to offer. But yet when they look at us, they see hypocrites. 9 times out of 10, when someone says they don't want to come to church, they don't want want Christianity, a lot of the times, I'm not going to say really 9 times out of 10, but there is a lot of those times, it is because they will say that church is full of hypocrites. Are we those unmarked graves? Are we the ones where people are walking in and not knowing? And then now we have, when we should have been a light pulling them to God, we have become something that is drawing them further away from God. This lesson is full of some insights and things that can really draw you and go through a great depths of energy in the classroom. But the things that we must realize is, one of the things, before I close and end off here, is that these words, as convicting as they may be, They're not words of condemnation, but they are words that should convict, that should also draw you closer to God yourself. Why do I say that? Because even with every woe that is mentioned, even though God or Jesus points out the things that are being done and the things that are not being done, he also points out the things that can be done to make the difference. He's saying in here, but these are the things that you ought to be doing. And so because of these things, these words are also filled with comfort and compassion as it directs people back to Jesus to have a deeper relationship with God. And we ought to be those same type of people. This is our Sunday school lesson for this first Sunday in this new school year. May God bless you and keep you is my humble prayer.
Have you had an opportunity to visit our amazing swag shop? Stop by and check out great items for Sunday school and church school. This includes t-shirts, pouches, mugs, and so much more. Find something that you'll enjoy or something for your favorite teacher.
Changing the way you see Sunday school with that Sunday school